Hey, numbers 6 and 7 of the Secrets of Jewish Belief relates to prophecy. Prophecy is something very important to understand because it tells us a lot about the world we live in and the lives we lead. The Jews believe that God indeed talks to human beings. He sometimes tells them the future and what's going to be, and sometimes he tells them what he expects them to do. Jewish faith came about through three prophets, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who taught that God existed and exists and that we have a relationship with him as human beings. Then you have the law, the Torah, which came from Moses, who was the greatest of the prophets. His prophecy was on a different level than every other prophet. Every other prophet experienced prophecy in a trance or a meditative state, whereas Moses' prophecy was conscious, almost conversational, one could say. And therefore Moses has the exclusive right to be the lawgiver. No other prophet, according to the Jews, before or after, had the right to give any more commandments or to remove any of the commandments. Now the Jews, though, make a very remarkable claim about the generation of Moses, that they were all prophets. In other words, that God revealed himself at Mount Sinai and gave the Ten Commandments not just to Moses, but to the entire people who witnessed it, which means that everybody became a prophet. And the entire nation also witnessed the miracles in Egypt and at the Red Sea, which made them temporary prophets. And this is a remarkable claim, which is almost impossible to refute. Because, well, let's say for argument's sake that somebody came along and claimed that, and made up this whole story. Let's call them Alfred. Alfred comes along and says, guys, this God gave us all these commandments. Everybody heard it, but you all forgot. So if he lived a few hundred years after the events were supposed to have happened, people would have simply said to him, really, how do you know? How come we never heard about this from our parents or grandparents? But if you'll say he lived 1,000 years later, then maybe he could get away with that, except for the fact that in Jewish history there is no Alfred. There is no case of an individual claiming that the entire nation forgot about the mass revelation and he came along to remind them. So it's a claim that is almost impossible to refute. Now, how does one become a prophet? About this there are different interpretations. One is that prophets are chosen by God because of the generation and the need to find someone who can connect and communicate in a way that will be heard and influential. The other school of thought is that prophets can actually learn how to be prophets. Through deep training in meditation and spiritual contemplation and self-discipline, they can achieve high spiritual levels and indeed gather prophecy. How does one know if someone is a true prophet or a false prophet? This is a very important question. The Torah gives us two ways. One is a bungler. What do I mean by a bungler? The prophet says, next Tuesday it'll be cloudy with a chance of spaghetti and meatballs. And next Tuesday comes, it's bright sunshine, not a spaghetti or a meatball in sight. That's false prophet number one. False prophet number two says, next Tuesday it's going to be cloudy with a chance of spaghetti and meatballs, and lo and behold, spaghetti and meatballs are falling out of that cloudy sky. And then the prophet says, aha, you see, I'm good. And so now I'm telling you to go worship this other God that you never heard of. Or, let's get rid of some of these archaic commandments which we don't need to keep anymore, and let's maybe put in a few new ones. Such a person who talks against the Torah, no matter how impressive their miracles or their foretelling the future may be, are considered false prophets, not to be listened to, subject to a very strict penalty. Are there prophets in the world today? Well, possibly. However, according to the Jews, prophecy ceased to really exist about 2,000 years ago. So it's hard to say that there's prophecy in the world today. There are some sources that say that sometimes children or dreams may indicate something which is significant. However, there is no prophet in the sense of the classic Hebrew prophets. One could ask, how could a prophet tell the future if we are supposed to have free choice as human beings? Doesn't the fact that we have free choice mean that we can do whatever we wish and the prophet can never know with certainty what's going to be? The answer to that, I believe, is the film analogy. Let's say you're at a wedding and you know that Uncle Ernie at some point during the wedding gets a little drunk and he knocks over and breaks the bottle of wine. And you have it on video. So as many times as you watch that video, Ernie will break that bottle of wine. But at the wedding itself, nobody knew it until it actually happened. The Jews believe that there are spiritual spheres which are beyond this physical world. And in those spiritual spheres, time doesn't exist like it does here, because time is a physical property. So therefore, it's like the prophet can go up to those spiritual worlds and see the entire movie in advance, while the people who are in the movie are experiencing everything in real time. And the prophet can then come back and tell us the future in order to exhort us to behave in a better fashion and to become more ethical and more moral and more spiritual. At the end of the day, the Jews' religion is based upon prophecy, which means that the Jewish religion is very much based upon high spirituality. And the more spirituality and the more aware we are of our spiritual origins in our soul, the better and holier the lives we will lead.